Okay. All right, here we go. Welcome everybody, and let's do a little bit of housekeeping before we get going so that everybody gets the most out of this. So you want to make sure you mute yourself. Tess Pirate is going to be moderating tonight, so she will mute everyone that she can, with the exception of those that are calling in on a phone.
Okay, I'll ask you later then.
So if you guys are calling in on a phone, we definitely need you to mute yourselves. Okay, great. I just muted everyone and we'll go from there. So if you have questions along the way, make sure that you text those, put those in the chat. If you don't know how to use the chat on the bar down below, there is a box for chat. You can also raise your hand if you want to ask a question. Okay, yeah, that was all. All right, so here we go. We're gonna talk about hormones. So when we think about hormones, let me tell you who I am first. I wanna have a little bit of a disclaimer here because I am a doctor, so I wanna make sure that you know this is educational information only. So the content of this presentation is not intended to be any kind of substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. This is general information for educational purposes only, should not be used in the place of a visit, any call consultation or advice your physician or healthcare provider would provide. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition, and you can take this information and use that with your healthcare provider to get better answers. In accordance with my state licensure, I am not permitted to offer any medical advice outside of the doctor-patient relationship. So if you're not a patient of mine, I'm not able to talk to you about anything on a personal basis. So just know that. So if you're new to being in my classes, you may wonder who I am. My name is Dr. Dolores Stevens. I am a naturopathic medical doctor, but my background goes way back. I've been in the medical field since 1995. Professionally, I've been using essential oils since 2001. I was also a registered respiratory therapist in my past life, as you call it. I worked in the emergency room, so I really feel for people right now. I have a lot of friends still in respiratory that are dealing a lot with this global health issue. So I was also a certified cardiographic technician, so I focused a lot on EKG work, on heart issues. I was a licensed massage therapist as well. And now I'm a licensed naturopathic medical doctor. I'm also a grief recovery specialist. And there's a lot that we'll even talk about here tonight that when I was doing the research really rang true for me about how grief was playing a role in hormonal imbalance. I do a lot of energy work and spiritual healing work. So I do shamanic healing, Reiki healing, energy healing in general. So I really like the old medicine that old village doctors have used in the past, as well as, just healing from a whole body, mind, spirit concept. So in my medical practices, in my training, first of all, I had extensive training in physical medicine, nutrition, biochemistry, mechanical medicine, homeopathy, counseling, and on and on. I did intensive internships. So I spent a lot of time, sometimes full year internships in gastroenterology, physical medicine, so chiropractic bodywork type stuff, cardiopulmonary, ENT, nature cure, which is really, we use a lot of essential oils in that training. And my primary focus is about underlying viral conditions. They contribute to what we're going to talk about tonight, as well as GI issues, chronic pain, and things like that. I use grief recovery and spiritual healing in my practice as well. So I work on a lot of anxiety, grief, mental health combination work, and making sure that the component of that with the physical is addressed, that we're not looking at a person as just anatomy and physiology, chemistry. We're looking at the spiritual wholeness of a person. So we're going to look at today what hormones are, where they are in our body, where they're working, looking at some of the most common types of hormone dysfunction, and then the goal being to balance those hormones. We're also going to look at of course, the doTERRA oils and the products that are going to support that hormone balancing. So when we think about hormones, this is what we usually see, you know, because most of the time when you think about hormones, you think about those monthly kind of hormones that happen in women only, right? And we can blame things on hormones. I love that when it says, it's not me, it's my hormones. And there's been times that's actually true for us. We want to respect our hormones, keep calm and blame the hormones. I love that. But look, the guys have hormonal issues as well because hormones are in every one of us. Okay, so it's not just a monthly thing. Tests, I'm getting messages that they're waiting on, some are still in the waiting room. Are you able to let them in?
I do not see that there's a waiting room.
Me either. Hold on, guys. Let me see. Let's see if we can get everybody in here. Yeah, it
Hey,
doesn't. Yeah.
a lot of times if you go and you click on participants and you have that screen show up on the side with all their names, down in the very far corner of that, there's a thing that says more. If you click on those 3 dots, it'll show you if you can totally disable the waiting room.
Oh,
If that's still,
I'm gonna see if it'll let me disable the, because it enable the waiting room was unchecked. And now
then
I
you
have
should be,
disabled it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, people are even calling me. Oh, sorry, it's recorded. Thanks, Laura. Okay, I know I told the thing not to have a waiting room. Okay, let's get back to it, and they can watch the recording if we can't get on. We can thank Zoom for this. So, okay. Now this is what we think of a lot of times when we just think about hormones. We don't think about hormones in a good way. We kind of think about hormones with a lot of frustration involved. So I like this, and it allowed, sorry, I'm muting everybody. It allowed me to really get in touch with the funny side of hormones. But what are they really? So hormones are, and I've got a bullhorn on here for a reason, and you'll see why. So according to Wikipedia, a hormone, in Greek language, it is setting in motion is what it means. It's any member of a class or any member of a class of signaling molecules, which is produced by glands. And we're going to talk a lot about glands. And they're in multicellular organisms that are transported by the circulatory system, so transported by the blood, to target distant organs to regulate physiology and behavior. So that's why that bullhorn's there. So all that means that hormone is, it is a signaling molecule that glands produce and secrete, and then they go into the blood and they target distant organs. So they're like calling out, hey, we need you to do something. And according to the Society for Endocrinology, a hormone is a chemical that is made by specialist cells, usually within an endocrine gland, and we're going to talk about what an endocrine is, and it is released into the bloodstream to send a message to another part of the body. And it's also often referred to as a chemical messenger. Hormones are found in all multicellular organisms, and their role is to provide an internal communication system between cells located in distant parts of the body. So these two things say the same thing. So an endocrine organ, an endocrine just means able to secrete and release a hormone. So it's a gland in the body that is able to release a hormone. That is considered an endocrine gland. If it can release a hormone, it's an endocrine gland. We've always heard about endocrinologist, and we just thought about it when we were sending someone that was diabetic to an endocrinologist. But now you know the study of endocrine is all of the glands that produce hormones, and there's a ton of those, and we're going to look at those. Here we go. And on the right, these are all of the organs that are able to produce these hormones. On the left are all of those hormones that are released, and we're going to go into each of those in a very simple way. So don't let any of this overwhelm you. But just look at it as, okay, this is more than just, endocrine involves more than just diabetics, right? It involves everything that is able to produce a hormone. So we are going to focus on the first three is called the HPA axis. We've heard Dr. Hill talk about the HPA axis. We might have been confused about even what it was, but it is very important. Somebody doesn't have sound. Okay. Okay, you guys can hear me though, I think. If you can't, you'll be letting me know. So the HPA axis is three primary glands that are able to work together. And the HPA stands for the hypothalamus gland, which is up here. Hypo means below, so your thalamus is above this gland. Your pituitary is this little, looks like a little hanging down sac here, and then the adrenal gland, which is on top of our kidneys. So it's connecting those three glands, and this is called an HPA axis because they work really well together. There's a lot of feedback that happens, and that is our stress response system. So we may think about hormones when you were getting ready for this class. You're like, okay, this is about hormones, so she's going to talk about my monthly cycle and my PMS and all of that. It is all tied in together, but it all starts right here. This HPA axis, if it is off, it's like the Earth. If the Earth's axis gets off of its axis, everything is cataclysmic. And that's exactly what happens with all of our hormones. If this HPA axis is imbalanced, all the other hormones will be imbalanced. So let's look at those glands. In particular, the hypothalamus first. And let me get my pointer. I had it earlier. Okay, I don't know. I'm not even bothering because it's so irritating to me today. Let's see. There we go. There's a little pointer. Okay, so we're going to start with the hypothalamus. So here's a lot of acronym, things that you may not know what they mean, and that's okay. You don't have to know what they mean, but I'm going to show you some connections. So the hypothalamus releases, I had to write a lot of these down because I couldn't remember exactly, thyrotropin. So I always think about thyroid releasing hormone. So it's called thyrotropin releasing hormone, and it is going to stimulate the pituitary gland to release thyroid stimulating hormone, which is going to stimulate the thyroid to release their hormones. And so I'm showing you this because I want you to see the relationships. And then here, the second one, this is called corticotropic releasing hormone. And so this is going to come down here and tell the adrenal glands to release these corticoids. We also have growth hormone releasing hormone. That's going to stimulate the pituitary gland to release growth hormone. So that's going to help us as we're growing and developing. Dopamine, we're familiar with that. Somatostatin. So somatostatin is a regulating hormone. So it really helps the hypothalamus keep all of this in a balance as much as possible. And it works with the other two as well. Now the pituitary gland, it releases, as we said, the growth hormone, the thyroid stimulating hormone, and then here's the ACTH, and this is a big one. So ACTH is adrenocorticotropic hormone, and that stimulates the adrenal gland to release these glucocorticoids, and that would be like cortisol, and we're all familiar with that. And so you can see if this axis gets off, we have a lot of dysfunction. And now FSH and LH and prolactin and oxytocin, those are definitely female hormones. So follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, then prolactin and oxytocin. Oxytocin and prolactin, those are of course during labor and delivery. Follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, those are cyclical. So every month those are coming into effect, and as well as menopause. So all of them are working together, kind of balancing each other out. This one is a melanocyte. stimulating hormone. So that's helping our body stimulate melanocytes, which gives us color. And then vasopressin, again, is another, see, we see it repeated again. And so this is a blood pressure regulating hormone. And then in the adrenal glands, we've got androgens. So those are your sex hormones. So you're looking at estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, even like DHEA. So DHEA is a hormone that also helps regulate your sex hormones, but it also helps with cholesterol and cortisol, and then glucocorticoids. And so glucocorticoids is what, it's like the building block of your cortisol. But one thing to know about glucocorticoids is if it's imbalanced, it is very pro-inflammatory. And so we don't, it's a powerful anti-inflammatory if it is imbalanced. If it gets out of balance, then it can cause the opposite. And then we have adrenaline, and we know what that is. And then noradrenaline is a subset of that. We don't talk a whole lot about it just because it's not as commonly seen. Okay, so looking at the HPA axis a little bit closer. So here we have the hypothalamus again, and here it is. Isn't it cute? And it's sitting here on top of the pituitary. This is the pituitary here. We have two parts of it. One's called anterior, one's called posterior, but that's not really important right now. But the hypothalamus releases that corticotropin releasing hormone. And I know that you're like, oh, these are all big words and I don't even know what it means. Just know this, we're really looking at this as a balancing act. Because if this is not able to release the CRH and tell the pituitary to release the ACTH, then our cortisol is not made. And if our cortisol is not made, then we have some issues. If it's made too much, then we have different issues. An example of that is, so when you're in a stressful situation and you need some of that adrenaline, you need to run, then the hypothalamus is going to trigger the CRH, which is going to trigger the ACTH, and that's going to trigger your adrenal glands, and it's going to say, okay, let's get this, all of these hormones going out into the system, and let's get some running happening. Well, what if we're in a stressful situation, and so if we're in a stressful situation all the time, then that causes that overabundance of cortisol in our system. And we've heard Dr. Hill talk about that. We've heard different ones talk about it over the years, that continuous flow of cortisol will cause a plethora of health issues because it normally is working at a pulsatile manner. So it's like ebbing and flow, and it works when we need it. Then the cortisol levels goes back down to normal, and then it's ready for the next time that we need to have more adrenaline going. And so it's supposed to be like an on-off system. But in today's world, we've kind of got it switched on. You see sometimes when you go in a room and it says, do not turn the light switch off, they have it taped on. That's kind of how our cortisol switch is. We have it taped on. And so when that happens, then it causes that inflammatory response, and it causes a lot of hormonal imbalance issues. And so wanted us to really look at the HPA axis as kind of our baseline for talking about hormones in general, okay? So feedback loops. So with any hormone, we have to have feedback loops because without them, everything has an on switch and it's taped and it can't turn off. And so we have a couple of different receptors. We have mineralocorticoids receptors, and then we have glucocorticoids receptors. And so when we look at like mineralocorticoids, we're looking at like aldosterone. And so and aldosterone is it's a molecule that helps regulate, it's a hormone that helps regulate salt balancing. And so if we need more salt, the the aldosterone is going to kick in, and it's going to shuttle some salt, or it's going to, help us get thirsty. So we drink more if we have too much salt, or drink less if we don't have enough salt, just to kind of retain that. And so the mineralocorticoid receptors, there's, some conditions. If this gets overabundant, that, or not enough, we can have some concerns here. One of them is Addison's disease, androgenital syndrome, dysautonia, and POTS. This is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And so this is like people that when they stand up, their heart rate shoots through the roof, and their blood pressure does. And so it, this is something that when we look at someone with POTS, we want to try to get a balance on these hormones, because we know that mineralocorticoid receptor is dysfunctioning, or it's overloaded. So also the glucocorticoids, that receptor, when it's receiving everything and everything is in balance, it is a very natural, glucocorticoids are very natural anti-inflammatories. And so that's what we were talking about earlier. If they get imbalanced, then it can actually cause inflammation. Okay. So what can happen if, what can be some causes if we're seeing this HPA axis dysfunction? We may wonder what caused it. Well, one thing that studies are showing now is that childhood trauma is playing a big role in that dysfunction of that HPA axis. And so trauma could be in a lot of different forms. It could be abusive childhood. It could be traumatic accidents that occurred, losses, griefs, major griefs. It could just be a variety of things as a child. And then also underlying infections. So whether it be like EBV, the cytomegalovirus, or anything in the herpes family, those are some big causes of that HPA axis dysfunction. Also, we could look at heavy metals, any kind of toxicity, heavy metals, mold, environmental toxins that we're exposed to. Stress also is really big, especially early childhood stress. We really see some dysfunction there. Ongoing adult stress, you might have later symptoms occurring than you would in someone that had early childhood stress. Also, oxidative stress, or you just have a decrease in antioxidant capacity, whether you're not taking in enough antioxidants or your body is not able to create them. So those are some things that can cause that dysfunction. And the way that looks is you may have a mineral imbalance, because this is something that, I'm sorry, I should have said this is their function. This is what the HPA does. So it regulates blood pressure. So if you have unstable blood pressure, you know that your HPA axis is off. If your mineral balance is off, so if you have a sodium potassium dysregulation, so like let's say you have chronic leg cramps, that could be back related to a HPA axis dysfunction. If you are looking at steroid and sex hormones that are not regulated, so if you are having female hormonal issues, male hormonal issues, any of those that are not in balance, like if your testosterone's too high or too low, if your estrogen is too high or too low, your estrone is too high or too low, progesterone, any of that, then you know that it could be an HPA axis dysfunction. Blood sugar. So if we're looking at people with diabetes, they can look back at this HPA axis and help get it balanced to get some regulation there. Tissue permeability. So sometimes we'll see people that have like a lot of edema, and that is because the tissue is too permeable and it's allowing that fluid to escape out into the tissue that it's not supposed to be in. Appetite, whether it's too much or too little. Sleep, too much or too little. Memory, that's usually going to be too little. Cardiac function of any sort could be related back to an HPA axis dysfunction. And so here's ways we can support that. And you're going to see this slide over and over and over, because this is going to support everything. Because of course your lifelong vitality, we've got to have adequate nutrients for these hormones to work. We've got to have the vitamins and minerals for them even to be created. and then the antioxidants and the alpha CRS to support the keeping the inflammation down so that the hormones can work effectively. And then of course the omega to help with that antioxidant support as well. So Copaiba and Adaptive, I have these on here because we talked about the stress, right? So we talked about our stress response, that's our HPA axis. The Copaiba and the Adaptive are your HPA axis support. These are the bottom line, because if we can help our body change our stress response, then we're going to see some change in our hormones as well. You guys know one of my favorites is DDR Prime. I just think it's one of the best things doTERRA ever created, because to be able to create some repair in those damaged DNA, that is a gift. Because I've not seen anything else on the market that can actually repair damaged DNA. And then Mitotomax, I love this for HPA axis support, because a lot of the ingredients that are in this formula are what we call adaptogens. And an adaptogen is an ingredient that supports the adrenals. It supports that stress response. And so Mitotomax is great to help not only with the energy and the stamina, but a lot of that is because it is supporting that HPA axis, that communication that's happening between those three, that allows the hormones to work more efficiently. So I hope that helps and makes sense. And of course, the most important, because if you're looking at this, and if we have new people on here, you're like, I cannot do all that. That's a lot of pills, or that's, you know, a lot of money, whatever it looks like to you. And if you're like, if I could only do one thing, what would it be? It would be the Lifelong Vitality, because we've got to have those essential nutrients. We've got to have the support of our metabolism, and those antioxidants are super important. We just can't be without them. And then if we're looking at oils, what oils are going to support our HPA axis? And so let's look at the oils that are created for that calming effect. So we've got Adaptive, Copaiba, Balance, Serenity, Vetiver, which is one of my favorites, Peace, Console, and Forgive, Motivate. Because when we have an overabundant HPA axis dysfunction, then we usually see fatigue, okay? Because if you've got fatigue, chronic fatigue, then you're looking at a very strong possibility of an HPA axis dysfunction. And so Motivate and Elevate, Citrus Bliss, Wild Orange, all of those are really helpful for that low energy and low emotional state. Clove is amazing because it's high in antioxidants. Of course, DDR Prime, as we talked about. Frankincense, that's a given. It's, you know, when in doubt. So bergamot is also great for things like anxiety, of course. You could use it on a point in your ear called Shen Min, if you're not familiar with that. And then Breathe. I love Breathe for HPA axis support, because so many times, as we've talked about, grief, you know, will get stuck in the lungs and it will cause like a chronic lung issue. And so Breathe is great just to help the body feel like it's okay to release that stress and that grief that we're holding in our lungs. And so I love it, even when I'm thinking about HPA axis, because it does provide that ability for our heart to open up. Also, it's got eucalyptus in it, of course, and eucalyptus is the oil of well-being. And so being able to support our HPA axis in that way it's great. So let's move to thyroid. And I need to keep a check on the time so we don't go forever. Okay, so the thyroid and parathyroid. So there's two lobes of the thyroid. And then you can look over here on the far right, and here's 4 little glands called parathyroid. So there's 2 on each lobe of the thyroid, and they do something totally different than the thyroid in a sense. So the thyroid and the parathyroid, you can see it's right there on your neck. When you go to the doctor, they should palpate it, make sure that it's not enlarged, make sure that it's not doesn't have nodules in it, because those are just signs that there is some serious HPA axis dysfunction going on and we need some intervention. So thyroid releases T3 and T4, and I'll tell you what those are. and calcitonin. And then the parathyroid releases PTH, and that's parathyroid hormone. That's pretty simple. And so this is stimulated by the pituitary gland, which is up in the brain, as I showed you. And this is thyroid stimulating hormone. It tells the thyroid to release these thyroid hormones. And then the parathyroid releases parathyroid hormone. So parathyroid hormone, so the parathyroid hormone and calcitonin, we're not going to go in detail on those. Just know that those two work together to balance your calcium. And so whether you have low calcium in your bone or in your blood, they work as a balance. One pulls in, one pulls out. And so they work together to balance that calcium level in your blood. So that's all we're going to say about that. So here's the thyroid. So its function is about metabolism. Because if you know someone that has low thyroid, they're very tired. They don't have a lot of energy. They even look, their eyes have lost a little bit of that luster. They are very, very fatigued. They're losing their nails. They're losing their hair. You know, metabolism is just not happening as fast as it should. And their growth and development as well. So, you know, you'll have them talking about, I'm losing my hair. I just don't have the energy that I did have before. And so if you had somebody that hyperthyroid, it's kind of the opposite. They're super hyper because their metabolism is going really fast. A lot of times they're thinner. For hypothyroid, a lot of times has a little more weight on them just because that metabolism is not working as well as it should. And so those hormones are T3 and T4, and we're going to talk about what those are. But know that iodine is the main building block for both the T3 and the T4. So with, you know, in the past, that's why salt now has iodine in it, because there was a time that they were removing the iodine because of issues. And so if you don't have enough iodine, then you've seen people with goiters. And so that's because that thyroid is working so much because it's trying to pump out some more T3, but the truth is it doesn't have enough iodine to actually make it. So it's kind of like it's trying to overcompensate for something that it's not able to do because it doesn't even have the building block for it. So we're going to look at T3 and T4 in a little more detail. So T3, iodothyronine, I know, challenging word to say. Try the next one. We're just going to call it thyroxine because that's its most common word. So T3 and T4. So T4, there is 3 to 4 times more T4 than there is T3. And the reason for that is because when they get out into the periphery, out into the liver and the kidneys, those T4s are actually converted to T3 as the body needs them. So you can think of T4 kind of like your reserve, okay? So you know that you've got plenty T3, and you guys are probably hearing my dog snore. So you've got plenty T3, but if you start running low, then the body will convert that extra T4 into some more T3 for your body to really help with that metabolic rate. And so the functions that we see happening with the thyroid is our body temperature. And so you may have somebody that's like, I'm cold all the time. My heart rate's slow. My weight is higher than I want it to be. I'm not able to digest everything like I want to. My cholesterol is not where I want it to be. I've got some brain fog. My cognitive function is not what it used to be. I can't concentrate like I used to. And then when we check their reflexes, they're low. When they do your reflex in your knee, and if your leg doesn't move when we're trying to stimulate that reflex, then we're going to look at the thyroid and see if you have enough of that T3 and T4 because that's what it controls. Now, if you have too much, then your body temperature is going to be a lot higher. Your heart rate's going to be a lot higher. Body weight's going to be less. Your digestion is going to happen really fast. Your cholesterol may be actually on the lower side. Your brain development is happening a little faster than you want it to. Your concentration is good, and sometimes it's a little hyper, and your reflexes are hyper. So when I hit you in the knee with that little reflex hammer, you may kick me across the room. And I've actually seen that happen. And so when you're at the doctor and they're checking all of those things, you know that's what they're doing. is because if you've got too much or too little of these, our body's got ways of telling us. And so here's some factors that really affect our thyroid function. So let's start over here on the far upper left. So factors that contribute to the proper production. So remember, we make these hormones in the liver, in the thyroid, and we need certain nutrients for that to happen. We need iron, and as we said, we need iodine. We definitely need tyrosine, which is an amino acid. Zinc is really important in here, as is selenium. We cannot have thyroid function without selenium. An easy way to get selenium is Brazil nuts. We used to tell patients, eat 2 Brazil nuts a day, and that gets you your dose of selenium if you're not taking any supplements. We also need vitamin E, and we need Bs, the 2, 3, 6, and we need vitamin C and D. And so there's things that inhibit that production as well. So stress, like we talked about, infection, trauma, radiation, medications. Fluoride is a big one because it is an antagonist to iodine, so it's going to reduce. So if your water has fluoride in it, if your toothpaste has fluoride in it, you really want to look at removing those things because it is an antagonist for iodine, which is necessary for our thyroid function. Toxins are really big. Pesticides, mercury is a really big one. Mercury is one that we can pass down from mother to child as well because it goes generations to generations. And cadmium and lead. Autoimmune disease like celiac, so that's someone that has a total intolerance for gluten. They are going to have an issue with their thyroid. And sometimes the thyroid is the first symptom that we see for someone that is actually in celiac. And so when we're looking at, you remember I told you in the liver and in the kidneys is where that excess T4 can be converted to T3 when we need it, right? So it's the storage form, and that has to have selenium and zinc. So if you're low on zinc, you can easily replenish that, and selenium is easy to replenish too. And I kind of think that selenium is in it is. So I've got the Microplex BMZ because I was having to take it. It has selenium in it and zinc. So there you go again. We've got our bases covered there. So factors that increase conversion of T4 to reverse T3. So reverse T3 is not really a usable form of T3. And so the reason for that is because on those cells, on our cells, where the receptor is for T3, which remember, T3 is that active form of the thyroid hormone. So that's the one that's going to give us the energy we need and all of that we need for the metabolism. They fight for that same receptor. And so we don't want we don't want reverse T3. So the factors that increase that conversion of T4 to T3, we want it to go this way. We want it to go T4 to T3. We do not want it to go to reverse T3. Here's what can make it go to reverse T3. Stress, trauma, a low-calorie diet, inflammation. So those cytokines can do it. Toxins, again, infections, liver and kidney dysfunction, and then a lot of certain medications. And so that is, we've got to reduce those. So here we've got adaptive, we've got Copaiba, we've got ways to reduce our inflammation. So we've got deep blue polyphenol, we've got turmeric soft gels, dual chambers, toxins. We're going to talk about that because this is a big one for me. Infections, we've got Symphony of the Cells to reduce those infections, liver and kidney dysfunction. We're going to talk about that. Then the factors that are going to improve our sensitivity to the thyroid hormones. And so we want the body to be sensitive to that T3 when it comes in, okay? We want it to be sensitive and we want it to bind with that T3 and not the reverse. So vitamin A, exercise, and zinc, because so many of us are deficient in zinc, and then there's so many of us that have thyroid dysfunction. And so this is a great way to just look at all the ways that we can really support our thyroid and and ways that we can reduce the things that can interfere with it. So the thyroid support. This is an oil blend on the left that you see. I actually prescribed one very similar to this to a patient, had them actually apply it directly to their thyroid hormone area, that gland, the thyroid gland area, twice a day. And so here's some oils that are great for thyroid support: frankincense, myrrh, clove, lemongrass, basil, peppermint, marjoram. I added Melissa. I didn't see Melissa out there, but here's why I tell you. Melissa is one of my favorite oils because I am a viral doctor, okay? I work in infectious disease. Viruses are my daily thing. And I know that Melissa is one of the most powerful antiviral herbs on the planet. And so I love the Melissa oil. I use it right now. I'm using it twice a day. Because I'm having the Symphony of the Cells treatment done on myself twice a day right now. And I'll tell you, I had a fever spiked on Monday of this week after we going out over the weekend. And so I've quarantined myself, and we're doing Symphony of the Cells treatment twice a day. So I'm getting Melissa twice a day. And I'll tell you, it made a huge difference in the way that I was feeling just within a day. So support your thyroid with essential oils. Even if you're not diagnosed with something thyroid, it is just a great way to really support your thyroid function just by applying this little blend. And I'll leave it up a second so you can take a picture if you need to. But, you know, I got this recipe. I remember when I had this patient that needed some thyroid support. I found this on Pinterest. It was a doTERRA blend, so I'm like, let's try it and see. And she had some really good results. Sorry, I got to spray the dog. And so you remember I got my spray. I'm going to spray the dog if I see her getting into something. And then the rest of the support is going to come from some of our supplements too. So we've got the turmeric that I talked about because we want to keep that inflammation down. As we talked about, we've got the Copaiba and the Adaptive. There again is that Mitotomax because it's great to help support that whole HPA axis. And remember, HPA axis feeds thyroid, so we got to keep it all really good. Okay. All right, and then most important again, LLV. Got to have it. Okay, now let's move to the pancreas. You can see it's down here. It is right below in the middle of our abdomen. This is the liver. It's right below the liver, to the left a little. So your spleen is over in this area. So it's the tail of it. So this is called the tail of the pancreas. It comes over and overlaps the spleen just a little bit too. So the pancreas is what we're going to talk about when we're looking at blood sugar regulation, okay? So we know these two hormones, insulin and glucagon, okay? So insulin is, of course, what is going to help us with our glucose intake, and then glucagon is a regulatory as well as somatostatin. So both of those are regulatory. So they're going to help our body regulate the amount of hormones that are happening, that insulin and glucose. So there is definitely a liver and pancreas relationship, okay? So I'm going to stay on this just for a few minutes, and we're going to look at, and I know it's a little fuzzy, but it was the best I could get it. So this is your pancreas, this is your liver. So when we have high blood sugar, so let's say we have eaten a big meal, or we eat something that was a high sugar content. So it's going to stimulate the body to release insulin. Insulin is made inside the pancreas by what's called beta cells. So beta cells produces and release insulin. And so when that happens, it's out into our bloodstream. It goes to the tissue cells. It allows the glucose to get in. I'm going to show you how that works. And then that decreases our blood sugar because then it helps take the sugar from our blood into our cells. And then if we have low blood sugar, let's say we haven't eaten for a long time, it's been 6 or 7 hours. Well, our body is going to say, okay, we need to stimulate some glucagon release. We may be thinking, I don't even know what glucagon is. Glucagon is that regulating hormone that tries to make sure that the balance between glucose and insulin is nice and balanced, okay? So it's going to say, let's get something happening here. We got to make that balance come back into place. So the pancreas is going to release that glucagon hormone. It's going to come over here to the liver. And in the liver, when we have eaten plenty food and our body used all of the glucose that it needed, but then there's extra left over. So then our body is going to turn that into a molecule called glycogen. So this is a compound of glycogen. I'll show you how it's made in a minute. So glycogen is the storage form of glucose. So we eat glucose, but then we have too much of it. And so we've got a bank of it over here, and it's called glycogen, okay? And that's in our liver. And so if we don't have if we're starving, our body's like, okay, we got this bank of glycogen in the liver. We could go get some of it out. And so then that whole process happened. There's a whole chemical process that says, hey, liver, you need to turn some of that glycogen back into glucose. So it stimulates the breakdown of glycogen, and that increases our blood sugar. Okay, does that make sense? So now I'm going to scare you a minute. Chemistry. So we just ate some glucose. And so now it goes blah, 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 blah. This is all happening in the liver. Blah, 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 pyruvate, blah, blah, blah. Boom, glycogen. Glucose, that's where the storage is. That's all you need to know, okay? You don't have to know anything else. It just goes through this chemical process. It goes through a process called glycogenesis to make glycogen. So it's turning glucose into glycogen to be stored in the liver. Simple as that, okay? So insulin and glucose, that relationship is imperative because insulin is the key. Because we just ate a meal, we've got glucose floating through our bloodstream, so our blood level shows that glucose is really high. Insulin says, okay, let me let you guys in. As you're piling up out here outside the door, let me let you in. You're on the sidewalk, you're spilling out into the street, let me let you in. Insulin comes, it turns the key in that receptor, and the glucose channel opens up. Glucose goes into the cell, and that way, when your blood glucose is checked, then we know if your insulin is doing its job by letting your glucose into the cell, or if it's leaving it all out in the street. Okay, does that make sense? So back to this again, if we do not have insulin turning that key, remember the key? Insulin's got to turn that key and let the glucose in. If it doesn't, it puts a lot in storage. It's got a lot of high blood sugar content. It's got a lot of excess in the bank because your insulin is not doing its job and letting it in. And there's some things that we'll talk about. Diabetes it's all about blood sugar regulation. So there are several types of it. Type 1 is where there has been an injury to the pancreas. Injury can mean quite a few things. It could be an infection, even a viral or a bacterial infection that caused some kind of damage to those beta cells. Remember, beta cells in the pancreas makes insulin. So an infection could damage those cells. Toxins that we're exposed to, whether we were born with mercury or whether we were exposed to lead or cadmium or copper. There's so many toxins, even pesticides and fungicides and cleaning chemicals. That's why we really want to make sure that we're using our On Guard cleaner because we know that it's free of toxins. Physical injury could also do that. So it could be like a blow to the abdomen. You know, children could have, I know children that have developed type 1 diabetes after a severe infection or after like a really bad bike wreck, you know. So any kind of damage to the pancreas, because you saw where it's at on the abdomen, it's right there in the center of the stomach at the top of it. So a really good physical injury could actually damage those cells. And so in type 1, we also see that the body is less efficient at actually releasing that insulin from the pancreas, you know, because those cells have been damaged. There's been destruction that's happened. It's just not able to function. You know, those cells got injured, so they're not able to produce near enough insulin for the body's needs. Now, type 1.5, this is kind of in between type 1 and type 2. And type 1.5 is, they call it latent type 1 basically, but it is, we're seeing it now in young adults that we thought had type 1, and then it's actually, we are finding that they're actually type 1.5. So they're type 1, but later in life, and there's some other components to it as well. But type 2 is where the cells are they're just resistant to insulin. So I'm going to go back up to the key. So the insulin that is attaching to that receptor, it has to be accepted by it. And when we're seeing insulin resistant, those receptors are just not as accepting of the insulin as they need to be. There are so many theories on what the cause of that is, but we do know that it's a lot about just overall hormone dysregulation. And so for me, I go all the way back up to HPA axis. I want to make sure HPA axis is working properly. And then I go from there, because I'm not going to start at the pancreas. I'm going to start at the beginning of the hormonal pathway. And so our body is just more resistant to, the cells are more resistant to the insulin. So those receptors are not as receiving as they could be. So insulin, of course, you know, it's a hormone that our body does make when it can. It is 20% higher in obese subjects. So patients that have excess body weight, they're going to have more insulin. It is lower in type 1, so they're going to have some unintended weight loss. And the Egyptians used to describe type 1 diabetic patients as melting flesh and limbs into urine, because if you've ever been around type 1, that's not well managed. They pee a lot and they're really skinny. And so it's because their body is not able to metabolize the way that it should, and it's at a higher rate. And so insulin levels, they are going to fluctuate throughout the day. And we've even seen in some research where you can have it like instantly insulin shoot through the roof just with putting something in your mouth. So it changes, and that makes it very challenging to measure insulin. And so, like I said, insulin resistance is when the cells are becoming resistant to allowing the insulin to turn that key, okay? And so the adrenals and the liver are very much a part of that. And so they're responsible for a lot of that activity that's happening. And so we want to make sure that we're supporting them so that that insulin resistance can hopefully be reduced. And so we're going to support the pancreas in the same way again. We've got to keep that stress response low. And so Cobaiba and Adaptive, they've got to be used in these situations. DDR prime would be this would probably be the number one here, because we want to help the body repair that damage. Do I know if it can repair that damage? I don't, but I totally believe in essential oils and the power of these oils that are in DDR prime. Now, Lifelong Vitality is amazing too for this. I will share that my mom was a type 1.5, and she was insulin dependent. And so she was able to completely be off of insulin with some really proper care. We made some really nice changes to her diet and got some things really on board. She's been using Lifelong Vitality for years. And so she, you know, when we have really got control of her eating habits, when she was eating at home, then totally off of insulin. She had to go to the hospital for a procedure and a hospital food for a couple of days. And guess what? She was back on insulin. And so just know that there are a lot of ways that you can eat in a way that helps provide the body with that support. So the pancreas can actually work a whole lot better because if those pancreatic cells have been damaged because of an underlying viral infection, and you remove the foods that feed that virus, then you're going to see some recovery from the pancreas. Also, we've got beautiful Slim and Sassy. You know, this metabolic blend of grapefruit, lemon, peppermint, ginger, and cinnamon, these were all formulated for blood sugar regulation. And of course, it's called the metabolic blend. So when you think about metabolic blend, you can think about this is what's going to help manage my hormones, because the hormones are responsible for the metabolism. I'm going to put these dogs on. They're like a little symphony up here. Okay, so we've got Slim and Sassy in the oil. We've got it in the soft gels. So it depends on if you don't like the flavor of it, you can do it in a soft gel form and just swallow it. It's really going to help with that appetite suppressant, because when the glucose is imbalanced, when that glucose insulin relationship is not balanced well, our body is going to incorrectly tell us it's hungry again. And what we know is that if we can get that hormonal balance, then we don't see that increase in appetite. Excuse me. And so it's really important to make sure that Slim and Sassy is a part of your daily routine if blood sugar regulation is an issue for you, whether you put it in your drinking water, whether you put it in a veggie capsule, whether you rub it all over your pancreas a couple times a day because you saw where it's at, you know where it is now, or take the soft gels. We've also got the gum now. I love to send these when I get a new oil user in our organization, in our community. I love to send them. I just cut off a couple of these little metabolic gums and I send them to them because it's a lot of fun just to give them a lot of different tools about, new things that they could try. And then you guessed it, Lifelong Vitality. You don't have to wonder if I'm a big promoter of Lifelong Vitality. This is what I recommend to my patients because it has everything that it needs. That vitamin mineral complex is the absolute best I can find. I was doing a class last night and I had a doctor from New York on there. I told him, I said, I invite you to try to find something better because I've looked everywhere. I cannot find anything better than this formula, this Microplex VMZ. It's the bomb as far as like the variety of vitamins and minerals it has and the dosing. That dosing is perfect. Then the Alpha CRS, I really thought I could develop a better one than that. And as I did more research, I realized they put stuff in there I hadn't even thought about. So this is absolutely the bomb. You got to make sure you're on this. And in your wellness consults with your oil community users, you've got to make sure that they know the benefit of the Lifelong Vitality because this could definitely change people's health. I mean, seriously, we've seen tremendous change with just Lifelong Vitality alone. So you can't be stingy with this. You got to share this with everyone. Hormone support overall. We can't talk about it without talking about Yarrow Palm. Yarrow is, in my world, yarrow is an herb that we use in a lot of different ways. And hormonal support is definitely one because it's got those beta-caryophyllene molecules in there. It's also got the chemazoline. It is a really powerful antioxidant with that combination with the palm. We've got the omega-5, that punicic acid. So the combination of these, you're really going to get a good support for your immune system because of that antioxidant support. Your nervous system, that beta-caryophyllene is going to help with the nervous system. Cellular function is going to be improved. This beauty complex, the soft gels, or I'm sorry, the capsules, they developed them thinking of the skin, and it absolutely is amazing for the skin. But man, it is awesome for hormonal support. You can take the oil itself, put it in a veggie capsule if you want to, and take it internally a couple times a day. We have seen some hormonal improvement with this alone. So you've got to make sure that if you're looking at any of this hormonal dysfunction I've talked about tonight, you want to make sure that Yarrow Palm is a part of this. I love using the Yarrow Palm, the body renewal serum, because antioxidant on your skin is a really important thing. And so I love using these products. This is when they came out with this. When they first said Yarrow, I was literally like jumping out of my seat because this is an oil that I actually made when I was in medical school. We went out as a class and we picked bushels and bushels of yarrow flour. And we probably, if I had to like put it in a measure, you know, it was probably a car load. Like if we had taken like a pickup truck out there, we probably would have filled the bed of that truck with yarrow flours. And then we put it in our little copper distiller in our herb lab, and we made a bottle of yarrow oil that was the size of our 5/8 dram sample bottle. And we had a truckload of that. And it was the most beautiful blue oil. And I didn't learn at the time that that was that chamazoline that was doing that. And so, but we had, and I'll tell you, we had someone in the class that sprained their ankle when we were out gathering that yarrow. And as soon as we got in, and we took some of that yarrow and we crushed it to release those oils, and we packed it around that ankle, and it started reducing immediately. So I'm telling you, this is a really powerful combination that they came out with. So this is an exciting part to me because before I even went to school, I said, if I could be a liverologist, I would. I didn't even know that they existed. So, sorry, I had to get a drink. So Zendocrine, one of my favorites, because I love supporting the liver. I am all about the liver if we can support it, because I told you I'm an infectious disease doc. So if we have an infection, we got to support that liver because it's detoxing everything. It's detoxing the infection. It's detoxing the toxins, the chemicals, the food, everything. The liver can get so overloaded. If you guys had or heard about fatty liver disease, it's because our liver is overworked to the point that we need some serious detoxification happening. And so Zendocrine is the detoxification blend. We've got it in the oil, we've got it in the soft gels, and we got it in the complex. And so it really helps to support the endocrine gland function. So that means all of these glands that we looked at, okay? We saw that whole body of all those glands that we were trying to see how they work together. Well, it aids in the filtering of the toxins as well. And so the oil, you can take the oil and you can apply it right on your liver. And I love to have people do this with castor oil, because castor oil will get it in that organ really fast and it will do some serious cleaning. If you want an added boost, just add it to some castor oil and put it on your liver. You can do it right before you go to bed. It's awesome for that. You could drink it in, you could put Zendocrine in your water. You could put it in a veggie capsule, or you could take the soft gel. And I think you should use Zendocrine every day. I think we all should, because we're so exposed to so many different toxins that it would be awesome if we could just be supporting our liver all the time. And talking about this complex, I'm just amazed at how amazing these chemical formulators are at doTERRA. They took barberry leaf, but milk thistle was the big one for me. Milk thistle in naturopathic medicine is the liver herb. Burdock root is also really important here because it helps with that supporting the liver's detox pathway. Clove bud, again, we're back to that antioxidant. Dandelion root, very cleansing, very nutrient dense for the liver. Using garlic fruit and red clover leaf. I love red clover leaf because it's great for any kind of infection, which that's going to be the case if we've got an overworked liver. Turkish rhubarb stem, and then psyllium seed husk, acacia gum, marshmallow root. I love marshmallow root. It's nice and slippery. We call it a demulcent. So it really goes in there and it just kind of coats the areas that are irritated, and it helps to clean things out. Osha, it's a really powerful herb. Anytime I'm sick, I'm going to take a tincture with some Osha in it because it is a powerful cleanser. Safflower petals and then kelp milk. So this is a great blend. I highly recommend that while it's available for us, at least now, get a couple bottles and make sure that you keep some in stock in case it's not available in the future for us. DDR Prime, as I'd mentioned, is one of my favorites. Here's why. Frankincense, great at helping with those free radicals. Wild orange, of course, got a healthy cellular response. Litsea, I love Litsia. It's going to give that cognitive function a boost. And then thyme, because you guys know I use Symphony of the Cells on every patient. Thyme is the third oil in that infectious disease protocol. So it is huge on promoting the immunity and cellular health in general. Clove, again, antioxidant. Then we got summer savory and nauli. I just used nauli before the call tonight. Really good for cellular immunity. And then lemongrass. Man, lemongrass is a big cleanser. I love using it. It's in my protocol as well. I'm sorry, Boyd's, but the one I use all the time. So it helps protect against those environmental threats, okay? Big thing. So here we go. Symphony of the Cells or Aroma Touch. You're gonna look at Symphony of the Cells for hormonal support. So we're looking at hormones, you know, HPA axis, thyroid, diabetes, even if it's just, you're looking at like your female hormone imbalance. And if I've not covered what you were hoping to hear tonight, just know if you have any form of hormonal imbalance, please start with that HPA axis. Get that HPA axis supported and see if you don't find a difference, because I believe you will. But in the Symphony of the Cells, I would start with the top three. Infectious disease is the absolute number one. Number two is the C2, then the cellular. But I'd also look at the hormone imbalance, inflammatory. If you're low on energy, you could look at the chi or the solar. Those are both for low energy. Lymphatic, just because a lot of times we've got infections that are causing this, and the neurological as well. If you're looking at wanting some whole healing, know that I'm here for you. I will be working on having some availability in August. If you want to do some naturopathic or wellness online consults, you want to customize some wellness to your life. If you're looking at wanting to, like, I want to really help, you know, recover my grief. I want any of these underlying issues that I've had in the past. The grief recovery method it's phenomenal for this. I do online only. It's very individual and confidential. It's going to help with unresolved grief, because what we know is that, you know, those traumas that we talked about that can cause that HPA axis dysfunction, so many times we can relate them back to a grief, because in naturopathic medicine, we're looking for that root cause, right? So if someone comes to me and they have a timeline of when symptoms started, I will start tracking backwards from that point. So I'm looking for a grief episode that launched things, because we are some serious grief holders. You know, human beings, we do not want to let that grief go. And so many times I hear people say, oh, this happened to me, I dealt with it, I'm over it. Well, what I will tell you is that is probably not as true as you think it is, because every time that I'm working with someone for grief recovery, we find things that they didn't even realize was happening to them because of a grief that was unresolved. So what I'll tell you is I see grief transform people physically as much or more as they see it emotionally. So if you need if you just even want some more information, my email's at the bottom here. Feel free to give me, reach out to me, and I'll give you information and let you see if it's something that fits you. I want to share with you some of the books that I read on a very regular basis. And you'll see there's a, you know, these are the ones that I was just like pulling for this, you know, Louise Hay, I love You Can Heal Your Life. You know, I love this metaphysical anatomy book. It kind of reminds me of Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. It's really close to that. And of course, all the essential oil books that I use. I love to read the medical medium information, because my saying is, you know, medicine is a practice, and if the information can come from spirit, I want any information that comes from God I can get. The Obesity Code, that's a really cool book too. Jason Fung, he's amazing. And of course, then the Thyroid Fix, it's written by one of my teachers, Dr. Sean Saska. And so he's also an essential oil user. So feel free to check out any of these books that you want. And then here's the references that I use. And something I thought of, I have these on every one of the presentations that I've done, and this is the first time I've showed them. So, and then that's all, folks. So I'm going to stop my share, and I'm going to open it up for any questions that you guys may have. I really appreciate
Deanna, Deanna Clausen had a question about the DDR Prime. Do you use it both topically and internally?
I would use it only one because it is really powerful. There's very little that I could say that you can overdose on, but the amount of oils that it has in there, especially like the really high energy oils, you might feel a little loopy if you used it both ways. I've seen some of that happen to where that it kind of felt like you used too much, you know. So I don't think you can overdose on it, but I think you can start to feel a little impaired if you use both. And then I saw somebody said, how do you use endocrine or something? Let me see. How often to use Zendocrine? Honestly, it really depends. So I think we all should be using it daily. And the reason for that is if you're alive and breathing, you're breathing in chemicals. If you're eating chemicals. Stress alone, we're stressing out our liver. So many things that we're doing are going to cause some type of toxicity in our liver that needs some help. And remember, what Zendocrine does, it supports all endocrine glands. Okay, so whether it's your thyroid, whether it's your pancreas, whether it's your pituitary, that HPA axis, no matter what it is, Zendocrine was developed to support your endocrine glands, so all of them. And so all of them in that picture that you saw, they're all going to be supported by the Zendocrine. Any other questions? Do you like to use, oh, there it was.
I just got one. Do you add Melissa, marjoram, and basil to the thyroid support blend? And if you do, how many drops?
You know, I don't remember the exact recipe that I did, and I'm kind of intuitive with oils. What I would say is, you know, get the rubber bottle in your hand, get the oil in your hand, and put as many as you want to put in there. Use your gut, people, you know, because it's like and this is not against who asked the question, know that, but I want you to trust your intuition, okay? Andy and Natalie Goddard gave us a poster about 3 years ago, and I left it hanging in my office for a long time, and I've got it set up to go to my new office now, and it says, the more you use your intuition, the stronger it gets. And I'm going to tell you that's true, and there's no better place to start practicing that than with your oils. Get over them, create your own recipe. If you feel like you need to add 4 drops, add 4 drops. If you feel like you need to add 20 drops, add 20 drops. There's no wrong answer, okay? Really trust what it feels like, because I'm not one to create recipes that I ever remember how many drops I put of anything, you know? So, and if anybody gets an oil treatment for me, it's whatever I feel like I'm supposed to do. And I tell my patients all the time, I'm like, I do this intuitively. I pick the oils intuitively. I use how many drops intuitively. There is no cookie cutter to this. And there shouldn't be to any of us, okay? Get your hands on your oils, add as many drops that feels correct, and know it's right and perfect for you. However many drops came out, that's how many you needed. Muscle testing. I love muscle testing, but I'll tell you, I've been trained in muscle testing, and I think that muscle testing can give the wrong answers if you don't know what you're doing, and you might short yourself on something that could be very beneficial if you don't know what you're doing with muscle testing. So if you have a practitioner that is trained in muscle testing and they teach you how to do it on yourself, by all means do it, but have somebody that's trained show you how to do it. So I use my intuition, I guess, more than my muscle on that, except when sometimes when I'm choosing supplements and I'm not, you know, and I've got, you know, sometimes we get our head in the game too much. I do that as well. I think too much about something, and I'm like, okay, I got to ask my body because my mind is really getting in the way. And so I do that. And so somebody's asking because they don't have a thyroid. Well, here's my belief on that. glands have energy, okay? They have energy. They have, just like we have spirit, our organs have spirit, our organs have energy. And so even if they removed your thyroid gland, the thyroid energy remained. And I believe that you can support that endocrine system by applying those oils and pretending you have a thyroid, and just put those oils on that thyroid area, just like if you had it, and just let your body's magic do itself, because God created a very magical body that we have here. And so we can't regrow an arm if it breaks off, but you know, inside we've got all of this energy floating around in there that just act, I would say act like you have a thyroid, and put that oil on just as if you have a thyroid. I hope that helped. Constipation. It sucks, don't it? So, well, you know, you're going to go back to think about what the digestive support is, so you're going to look at the digestive supportive supplements and oils. And what I would say is, if you've not had a wellness consult with the person that introduced you to oils, ask for one. Vaginal dryness. Well, we know that vaginal dryness is about hormonal imbalance. Hormonal acne, it's about imbalance. So just like we talked in the presentation, go back to the beginning, that baseline of all of the hormonal imbalances, and you just want to look back at that HPA axis. Make sure that that is in balance. You're supporting that in every way that you possibly can, because if a hormone is not working correctly, a lot of times it's because of whether it's some kind of infection or damage or toxins that is causing that imbalance. And so we can support it with a lot of these supplements, and then the Zendocrine to help kind of like lessen that load. I think that we'll all see some really good results from that. So Tess, any more questions before we jump off?
Yeah, there was just one more. With high blood sugar, would you suggest adding DDR or Slim and Sassy?
Blood pressure, you say?
Blood sugar, high blood sugar.
I think anytime that, because Slim and Sassy was designed for blood glucose regulation, and it is the metabolic blend. Anytime that there is blood sugar dysregulation, I'm going to bring Slim and Sassy into the picture. I love DDR Prime all the time, so I'm never going to say no to DDR Prime. But Slim and Sassy, I mean, that's what it was formulated for. So if I know that they created something for a specific reason, I'm definitely going to use that one for it.
Awesome. That was tons of great information. Thank you, Dolores.
I'm going to tell you guys something. When we did this survey, let me stop this chat.